I am Craig Thomas, CCO of Dlala Studios. Like AJ kind of hinted at earlier, it's a semi-made up title. It's one of the perks of having your own studios. You get to decide what people call you. More often than not, that isn't the case. But CCO for me is Chief Creative Officer. So I run, kind of head up all the design stuff, any of the creative stuff pretty much comes through me. It is worth mentioning that since I've been with Dlala from the very start, I think this is my 4th job title, including tech, creative and all kinds of stuff. So it does kind of fall apart. I'm going to be talking about growing a studio, so Janksy to Team17. I realise a lot of the words on here aren't going to make any sense to any of you guys. I wouldn't worry too much about that right now. Just before we start, I just want a quick show of hands. All students, yeah? Programmers? Designers? Artists, 3D animation, the other kind of stuff. None of the above, other? Cool. What's yours? Oh, interesting. So AJ will be more of use to you for that one, I guess. But we'll come on to it. So what I'm going to be doing is talking about how we've kind of grown our studio. A lot of this may not be strictly relevant because you are still students, but obviously as you're going onwards and upwards, you're going to be working on kind of new projects, new things, products of that. It's not working. So it's fine. Wicked. So you'll also notice that this slide might look suspiciously similar to one of AJ's because I may or may not have stolen a lot of the content from him. So with that in mind, I started, like pretty much everybody in here has, at university. It's a picture of the university I went to, which was the University of Greenwich. You'll notice the main difference between my picture and AJ's is I'm actually not in this one. For very similar reasons, is I hardly ever turned up. I just didn't fucking bother because it was boring to me. It didn't really make much of a difference. And I know they're probably going to regret bringing in a bunch of guys telling you how much of a waste of time uni was, but I'm assuming you've got no lecturers in here? Excellent. So we'll carry on in that case. For me, this felt like a complete waste of time. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I was doing computing, so not specifically a games programming course or anything like that, but I was learning computing. I turned up, did my exams, did my coursework, did okay, didn't do great, but that was mostly because of my complete lack of attendance. Absolutely hated it. But at the same time as I was working here, I was making my own stuff at home, so I was kind of prototyping. I was making sure I had a whole backlog of games I was making myself, because that was really what I wanted to do. But I did, of course, need some kind of money to go alongside that. This is a picture of the Olympic Stadium in East London. I can actually claim a credit on this building, despite the fact all I did was office work and kind of IT setup. It's made me notice, actually, when AJ's been doing his presentation, how similar our roots were from where we started to where we are, and I guess it's going to be quite similar for a lot of you guys, so I think that would be the interesting point. But it is worth mentioning, I absolutely hated this as well. I know it's going to make me sound like quite a negative person. I promise that's not usually the case. I absolutely hated it. The first chance I got to jump ship, look at that, exactly the same slide, was at Jagex. I got interviewed at this place. I went down there for a 2-day interview, which again was quite a scary process. They took us through some coding tests and all sort of stuff. And then they offered me the job, the exact same position as AJ, this game content developer role. So I turned up and they said, yeah, you've got the job, we need you to move to Cambridge. And that was in 2 weeks' time. So I had to just completely shift my entire life halfway across the country. When I got there, knew nobody, knew absolutely nothing. It was absolutely terrifying. But my first role in the industry, I mean, that was exciting for me. It was like, the games industry finally wants me. This was what I really, really wanted to do. But 3 days into it, I was absolutely fucking terrified because, to me, I was surrounded by people that had been doing this for years and years and years, and I knew nothing. And I genuinely, after 3 days, felt like quitting. 3 days into the games industry, I just felt like stopping. Because it was so horrendously scary. But one thing I do really want to nail home today, and it's probably something I should have made its own separate slide for, is this concept of really pushing your boundaries when it comes to what you're comfortable doing. So your comfort zone is something I'm sure you've all heard of before. It's things that you are kind of standard, you can do whenever you want to do. But if you imagine kind of this giant circle around you where you're sitting right now, tasks that you're normally used to doing, so for some of you guys it might be writing some simple coding classes, doing drawings or anything like that, is really, really simple for you. Maybe for you guys it's slightly harder doing things like standing in a room full of people and talking. That would be slightly towards the edge of your comfort zone. What you really want to be doing, and this is both for a business perspective and personal growth, is try to straddle that line of your comfort zone. 1 foot inside, 1 foot out. So always make sure you're pushing things that you don't necessarily feel comfortable doing, because the more you do it, the more you will get used to it happening. Anyway, so the story continues at Jagex, and I was paired up with the other beardy twat, AJ. That was where we first met. He likes to tell people he was mentoring me, but because I'm up on the stage at the moment, that's not what was happening. They kind of paired me and him together because they wanted someone to look after him. So we ended up spending a lot of time together. And to be honest, the stuff we were doing on Stellar Dawn was was pretty good. We struck up a really good partnership, a really good duo. We had nicknames and everything. I'm not going to go into that because that's actually quite embarrassing thinking about it. Now I've started saying that. But it was a really good time. But then, as AJ told you earlier, he broke up the dream team. He broke up the pair of us and just abandoned me for Bossa Studios, so I was left on my own there. But true to the story, he did say, as he was leaving, he said, Craig, in 6 months' time, you're going to be bored of this place. You're not going to want to be here anymore. And then he left, and that was it. But they moved me over onto RuneScape, which was fucking terrible as well. That was a horrendous piece of trash. That was not fun at all. I know I'm supposed to be sugarcoating because some of you guys do know Jagex people. Hated it. It was not fun at all. So 6 months after the day AJ left, I called him up, and that was, AJ, hi, it's Craig, help, kind of thing. And we sorted some stuff out, and because I built up this portfolio of work I'd done previously, went to an interview at Bossa Studios, and that was when we met up again. So I don't even know why the slide's in there because you've seen his face already. AJ's on at the front, unfortunately. And it was the start of a long-term, it feels like marriage, I think. Girlfriends will definitely say the same thing. We spend way too much time together. I didn't have this beard beforehand, and I'm not sure it's actually mine. I've still got a funny feeling it's partly his, but that's the way it kind of goes. So that was AJ after he abandoned me, and I moved over onto Bossa Studios. You guys remember the slide from earlier now? Because I totally stole this animation. Yeah. It is. It's probably the best one in there, I'll say. Monster Mind, AJ kind of touched on it briefly. It was this multiplayer Facebook game, and it's probably worth mentioning, Facebook games, it wasn't what we wanted to be doing. We grew up wanting to make games like Mario. We comment on Mario 64. Facebook games wasn't really what we wanted to do. We didn't want to do free-to-play. We'll go on record saying now, I absolutely hate doing free-to-play games. It's not something that's much fun at all. It just, for me, and for the rest of the team, I'll talk for them now, it feels like it takes a lot of the core elements out of a fun game. And you've got to start thinking about monetizing certain things and how you can convince a player to pay money as they're playing. That kind of feels a little bit evil, I think is probably the way we put it. Having said that, Monster Mine was a complete blast to work on. We absolutely loved it. It was a city builder, as you guys kind of know now. Building cities, setting up defences like a tower defence game. But it was real time, so we could build our own cities and then send these awesome 60s kind of style monsters. So there was the giant King Kong, we had giant lizards, UFOs. It was amazing. It was so much fun, and we really, really enjoyed it. I'm going to show you that animation again just for the fun of it. We did win that BAFTA, and it was probably still one of the highlights of our career. It was amazing going there and hanging out with the big guys. So Notch was there. We got to meet guys from Nintendo, from Valve. I mean, literally walking around and bumping into these people was like hugely overwhelming for us. These are some of the most successful people we could ever hope to meet. And it was at that point, like AJ said, we kind of realised, you know what, this might not be for us anymore because we've won this award for somebody else. Surely there's more to it. We can't really do much more here. So we decided that we'd leave and form our own studio, and that was kind of what happened next. That was when Dlala was born. We did do the idiot approach. Like AJ said, we had no money. This was an absolutely terrifying time, and that's probably something we do differently maybe, is come into this with money, because there was very, very little we could actually do. We started struggling for a lot of things. I'll explain that as we're going on. We left, had no game plan, didn't really know what we were planning on doing, but we did come up with a pretty cool concept for a game. This was one that we picked, and I'll go on and explain a little bit about Janksy in a sec. But at this time, AJ was doing tours to different conventions and stuff, and I don't think it was developed, but I'll say developed anyway. Bumped into one of the guys at Microsoft, and luckily for us, it was around about this time they were releasing Windows 8, which was obviously their new operating system at the time, and they were looking for a bunch of release titles. So we thought, well, maybe we can push this and see where we can really go. So we asked them, we spoke to them, and they said, yep, if you can get a game done for us by release, we'll feature you, you'll get a whole load of attention, it'll be front page of the store, all that kind of stuff. So it was like, brilliant, that's fantastic, we can definitely do this. But then they told us we only had 9 weeks to do it in, which wasn't quite as exciting. But we started cracking away and working on this. And this was kind of the concept here. It was all about this little green alien dude, and the basic concept was, for a touchscreen device, is you drag him out and you flicker around these different galaxies, trying to collect all these nebulae. Not nebulas, and you had to get to the ship at the end. And it was really, really simple, but we absolutely loved it. From a design perspective, it was quite nice as well to work on, because it was the first time we'd worked on a proper touchscreen interface, which isn't necessarily something that comes naturally to us. But we managed to jump into it and did a pretty good job of it. But we realised that there was no way we'd be able to do this in 9 weeks on our own. We just couldn't. So we put out feelers on different social media networks, so Twitter and Facebook, asking if anybody wanted to jump in. jump in and help us out. And that was when Chris came along. So Chris was, at the time, a fresh graduate. This is him at the Developer Awards. I'm definitely going to regret using that picture because those eyes are definitely burning into me right now. But Chris was fantastic. He came on and we did a really, really shitty code test just to make sure we knew he was up to scratch. And it got to the point where he was sending back answers and we were having to Google what he'd written because he was clearly way better than we were. He knew what he was doing, more so than us. So he jumps onto the team and, again, because we had no money, worked for free for a long period of time. And Chris has been with us. And I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but something we definitely learned from that was experience doesn't necessarily mean better. We were lucky that we took a chance on a graduate, which is what all you guys are going to be. And he was an absolute gem. The advantage he had was he knew what he was doing. And he didn't do a particularly good job with his degree. Like AJ was saying, he kind of flunked out. He just didn't seem to enjoy it. But we let him take that chance, and I tell you what, that was paid back no ends. Anyway, we got Janksy done. Janksy was released after those 9 weeks, and true to their word, Microsoft actually released that on the front of the store page, so we got to see that everywhere. But one of the best things about this was, it was like 50 different stores around, John Lewis stores around the country, they had these giant kind of 80-inch touchscreen TVs. So there was one on Oxford Street, and we actually got to go and play Janksy on these big TVs in front of thousands of people, which was quite an exciting time for us. As we were going through and making this, we got in touch with one of the guys that developed, a guy called Will. He was actually their editor at the time. He's left. Develop magazine, for anybody that doesn't read it, it's one of the coolest kind of development magazines you'll be able to get. So if you get a chance to get a subscription to that, I highly recommend it. And not just because of what I'm about to tell you. We went and met this guy, and he was like, okay, we're doing a quick little piece on Microsoft, work with Microsoft. We like a couple of quotes, we'll stick it in the corner of the magazine on one of the pages. So we went and met him, we went up to the pub, despite the fact we'd pretty much run out of money by this point. Went and spoke to him, and spoke to him, and spoke to him. And as you've probably figured out from the amount we're doing this today, we're actually quite good at just non-stop talking lots of shit. And apparently they really liked that because they got back in touch with us, and rather than it being this little text they put in the bottom corner, they did like a 5-page spread on us. But moreover, for some bizarre reason, they decided to put these faces on the front cover. They did this full front cover picture of us on the front of the magazine. And I tell you what, I felt like an absolute rock star. I actually forgot about this. I felt like an absolute rock star the first time I picked up that Develop magazine, and I was sitting on the train on the journey home. I was looking at it, and I'm telling you, people were looking at it because, well, it was probably because I was kind of forcing it, but it was a fantastic feeling. It was that first moment of, I guess rock stardom is one way of putting it. I know it's nothing much. It's on a magazine that most people around the world aren't going to read. But for us, it was like, you know what? We're kind of heading in the right direction. But the other thing that Janksy did, which was pretty cool, is he got the attention of some of the guys at Microsoft. That is Lee Shinneman, who is an absolute superstar. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him right now. But he'd been in touch with us, and he offered some advice, some guidance, and where we were going wrong, what we could do better. And when someone like Lee Shinneman asks to give you advice, you pay attention to him. It's worth mentioning he was the head of Rare. Do you guys know Rare? They did all the... He has worked on a bunch of different games that we grew up playing. He was effectively our childhood, and that's not an exaggeration. Games like Diddy Kong Racing is... I mean, for me, personally, Diddy Kong Racing is better than Mario Kart. Won't start any arguments right now, but it's a personal preference. Stuff like that, knowing that this guy wanted to give us advice, was an absolute incredible godsend to us. And it's actually worth mentioning, in that video, he's actually talking about us as well, which is why we like to use that screenshot. But after the third meeting that AJ had been going to, by this point, no money, we'd completely run out, so I was at home working in my pyjamas at this point. AJ called back home and said, I've just had another discussion with Lee. I was like, okay, cool. What advice has he given us this time? He said, no, you're not actually going to believe this. He actually wants to give us some money and bring us into the studio and work with him. And he was right, I didn't believe him. I thought, well, why would they want to take 3 schmucks that have worked on some shitty little Windows 8 game and bring them into the studio to work with? But it turns out that was exactly it. They'd started this incubation program, and they were wanting to work with a bunch of different studios. So that was kind of how Microsoft Studios and Dlala started working together. That was kind of the rules. It was initially a 6-month incubation program, so they wanted us to go in-house, go sit with them for 6 months, which did become 13 months because it was working out so well for the pair of us. The important thing for us is that we got to pick our team and initially pick our projects. So we knew what we were working on, we were making all those decisions. But the fact that we ran out of money kind of really gave us this edge and this reason to do it. They were fully covering the salaries of any of the guys we wanted to pick. But obviously on the flip side of things, any IP we created, so any of the really cool concepts, they owned, which was a bit of a shame because working and creating IP is the reason we all do this game and stuff. But we did get a chance to work with some incredible talent. Rather than sitting there and going, right, well, how would they have done this on Fable? We could go up 2 flights of stairs and go and ask Simon Carter, the guy that literally invented Fable. He was the person that created this. And that was an absolutely amazing feeling. Or how do they do this on FIFA? How did the AI work on FIFA? Let's go and ask Andy. Andy will tell us. And that was a really strange experience, being surrounded by so many talented people. But they were absolutely fantastic about it, because I think it's probably fair to say the amount of stuff we learned from them, we've saved ourselves about 3 or 4 years in the industry, because we just soaked up so much information. But the important thing here, and it's definitely worth picking out, is that we got to pick our own team, and that's always been really, really important to us. That image is actually photoshopped, and I'm not really holding that magazine, but that is the front cover that we actually got to show, which is a pretty nice moment. You can see people in the team. I'm going to go through and talk to you about these guys, but building a team was so important to us, and it's probably been the most important aspect of our growth and how we've developed as a studio. Do it right, don't do it fast. Right now that isn't going to be particularly relevant to you guys, but I'm sure you've all worked in group projects where there could have been one bad apple, one person that hasn't necessarily pulled their weight or hasn't quite fit in. That can completely destroy an entire working relationship for the rest of the team. It gets really quite poisonous. So for us, doing it right is so much better than doing it fast. There's a guy called Ed. Now Ed started a little studio called Pixar. Pixar have obviously been quite successful since then, but he summed it up perfectly. Getting the team right is the necessary precursor to getting the ideas right. It is easy to say you want talented people, and you do, but the way these people interact with one another is the real key. Even the smartest people can form an ineffective team if they are mismatched. And it is so important. It's definitely something we've learned. We've worked with people that have just ruined projects. Not intentionally, but because they haven't fit in very well. They haven't fit in socially, or they just haven't been the right Dlala, I feel. And we've had that, and that can really, really cause problems. So we decided, right, we can now get the chance to pick our own team. What's the best way to be interviewing these people? And it actually turns out we did the, I guess it's common, but the scumbag approach. We just started stealing people. Stealing people we worked with previously. Now Ben, we worked with at Bossa Studios, was when I first met him. The guy that AJ was talking about, telling him to fuck off very often, that's Ben. Ben is absolutely brilliant, and he has managed to bring the absolute best out of Chris. He's incredible. He's our lead tech, and he will be with us, hopefully, forever. But he's the kind of person with a banking background that wouldn't necessarily have had that much experience in games. In fact, his first job was also at Bossa when he came along. But we stole Ben, knowing how good he was. Again, someone not with that much experience was fantastic. Introducing Loudon. Now Loudon we stole from Jagex. You can actually see he's wearing a Stellar Dawn top there, which is where we met him there. Loudon is our designer. He was only a QA at Jagex, but stepped up his role because he always wanted to be a designer. So he worked his way up. Unfortunately, Loudon is one of the coolest guys you'd ever meet, and he's unnaturally handsome, which is why I've chosen this picture. But he's actually a pro snowboarder. Probably worth mentioning. He's got loads of cool stories, but he fits in with the team so well. Just to summarise that a little bit, it's worth mentioning this again. Good ideas plus a shitty team is not going to equal awesome. It just doesn't work like that. You really, really need to make sure you get the team right. So that was always the most important part to us. Now, moving on to the overall section. We spent our time at Microsoft. We did our 13 months. It got to the end of that, and I can't even tell you about the games we made because of the whole NDA stuff. We finished our contracts there, decided, you know what, we now want to go back out to the garages working alone again. Again, with no money, which, thinking about it, seems to be a running theme for us. I'm hoping it doesn't last too much longer. But we decided we wanted to make a game for us at this point. We'd spent a lot of time playing games like Worms, Armageddon towards the end of our contracts. We absolutely love the Worms games. It sounds like a sales pitch, but I promise you that's true. So we really wanted to make a game that was something that we wanted to absolutely love to play. So we came up with this concept of Overworld. Now Overworld, I'm going to do a real quick summary of it. It's this 2D platform brawler. So you're going to be running around fighting your mates, but the rules and the objectives are constantly changing. And I'm sure, with the exception of a couple of people in here, you guys haven't played it. But has anybody played the card game Flux? Damn it, I thought we could get away with claiming it as our own then. Okay, so it's basically Smash Bros meets Flux. So you're running around fighting each other. 1 minute the game type might be King of the Hill, so you'll get points by standing in this shiny circle of light. But somebody might play a card to change it to Swag Bag, which is an oddball game type. So the person holding the bag and running away with it is then getting points. But slightly more to that, you can also play cards to change things like points values. So I could grab hold of the bag and set it so they'll get 10 points a second. I could kill AJ and then set it so it takes 10 seconds for him to respawn. So every game feels different. It's fast, it's frantic, and we really, really love it. You can kind of see it from the screenshots here. These are now slightly old screenshots, and it doesn't do it as much justice, but that's overall running on PC at the moment. So we started working on overall. We first came up with the concept pretty much the week after we left Microsoft. Put together a quick 2-page design doc and gave it to our tech guys. And our tech guys ran with that for like 5 days and then put together a really, really horrible looking prototype that AJ kind of showed earlier, one of his screenshots. But it was so much fun. We spent an entire weekend just playing this crappy prototype. But we absolutely loved it. And that was when we kind of realised, you know what, we're kind of onto something here. So after 9 weeks of working pretty solidly on it, we took it to Res. And Res was the first time we showed this to, well, pretty much anybody outside of us lot. And it was absolutely terrifying because it's like showing your baby to the world and then worrying that people are going to say, holy crap, you've got one ugly kid there. And that is genuinely how it felt. Every time someone would come up and sit down and play the game, you'd worry that they would absolutely hate it. But for some reason, people seem to enjoy it, which is a really nice thing. Does Chris look photoshopped there? Does he look like he's actually there? That's odd. That's odd. I hadn't noticed that. But it was a really cool experience because we had families coming back and playing over and over and over again, and they sit down, and we had this one family. I'm not going to name names because I don't think they'd want me to. But we had this brother and a sister, and this dad and the mum were standing behind them watching, and the mum refused to play. She just would not play because I don't play games. It's not my kind of thing. But after 2 or 3 games of the kids playing, she sat down and joined in, and then they must have stayed there for a good hour and a half or so just playing the game, and it just felt really, really cool because that was my family when I was younger. That's exactly how it felt, and it was so much fun seeing other people doing that. But you can kind of see, this is us, the picture at the bottom. There are more beards than not, which is definitely a good thing. The 2 extra people you got there at the front is Grant, is the other dude with glasses. He's an artist that AJ knew, so that's where, I mean, you're in a band together, is that right, dude? So Grant did all the artwork, and this one here, who looks suspiciously like me, is my younger brother, and he did all the music and sounds and voice kind of script and stuff. So I'm sure some people in here can tell you. Do you want to just give a quick wave to the room, Tom? Tom, do you guys know Tom? He's actually one of the voices in the game, and I'm sure he won't shut up too much about that. So Tom's in that. So that was overall at Reds, and it was brilliant because showing everybody was fantastic. But we'd gotten to this point where we needed to know what to do with it a little bit more because it was 7 guys making a game by this point, but we didn't really know which direction we were heading in. But luckily, we started talking to some guys at Team17, and they started giving us some really, really good advice on what we should be doing with the game, where we could be taking it. And one thing led to another, and they actually ended up offering so much advice that they kind of fell in love with the game. These guys know what they're doing, making so many multiplayer games, right? We might have grown up playing Mario Kart, Diddy Kong Racing, stuff like that, but these guys created the Worm series, which was the exact same feeling we got. We've sat down in rooms, we've been shouting and swearing at each other and playing Worms, and that's the same feeling we got. We're trying to destroy friendships and families with overall, and they seem to understand that, which is quite nice. So because of that, they kind of stepped in. Here, so they need another animation. And they've actually been publishing us. So we've been working really closely with Team17, and they have helped bring it to Steam Early Access. Hint, hint, that's where it is now if you guys want to check it out. Highly recommend it, obviously. But they've been really, really good. We've been bouncing back and forth with them. They've been giving us any guidance we need. And it's that kind of mentoring relationship that I think everybody really needs. So that might even be a good piece of advice to lean on. If you can find yourself a good mentor, whether it be directly in the industry or not, it's worth hanging on to because they will really, really help. One final plug, Xbox One, PS4. We're also doing this later on. It'll be kind of March, April time. So by all means, early access now, Xbox One, PS4, also next year. It'd be great. Okay, so I think I've actually run a little bit shorter time, which is good. A few final bits of advice that I really want to pull out to make sure. Push your comfort zones. It's really, really important. This, for me, is probably the most important thing that I've ever really taken on board. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with the concept of it, but really make sure you're pushing these comfort zones because that's how you will grow as a person. Genuinely, that will help. Trust your instincts. AJ mentioned this earlier on. We've pretty much always guided ourselves based on things that we believe and we trust. There have been a couple of times where we've ignored our instincts, and it's always proved wrong. We fucked up a couple of times because of it. It is really important to listen to yourself. You know yourself better than anybody else. Just trust your gut. make your own luck. Now, a couple of times I mentioned this. A lot of people hear these stories that we've been doing the way they've gone, and they'll often say, well, the thing is, Craig, you guys have just gotten lucky. This is where this luck has come from. It just happens. How can you encourage other people to do this when a lot of this has come down to luck? It's true, we've been pretty lucky, but we've made our own luck. It's not like getting on the front cover of Develop was pure luck. We only did that because we were really putting ourselves out there, really making sure we were going, talking to all these different journalists, because you never know when it might work. Will was, luckily enough, the guy that sorted it out for us. There are hundreds of other journalists we've spoken to that haven't done that for us. Make your own luck, you really, really can. It won't necessarily fall into your lap, but you can move yourself around when it does. People, people, people. I know I mentioned the team, and I've mentioned it over and over again. We wouldn't be where we are now without the team. It's really, really important to surround yourself with people that you're going to love working with, you're going to want to work with. I mean, it's a common theme you'll hear from anybody that's happy at any studio. If you're with people you don't want to be with, then the chances are these people aren't going to be happy either. These are potentially people you're going to end up crunching with, working 20-hour days with. I mean, hopefully you won't have to do too much of that. It's a little bit shit when it happens. But these are people that you're going to want to spend so much time in a room. Me and AJ have had countless arguments. We will be able to stand and shout and swear at each other. And that's it. It gets left. It's done. We can then fix and move on because we trust each other. And the same thing applies to the rest of our team. If somebody thinks AJ's been a complete dickhead, they'll tell him. If somebody thinks I've been a complete dickhead, they'll tell me. It's really important to have that trust in people that you want to be around. Finally, always moving forwards. It kind of all moves into this similar kind of thing. There's no point staying stale and stagnating. If I hadn't want to do that, I'd probably still be at Jagex or still working on building sites or anything like that. Moving forwards is the key, most important thing. Just make sure you're always doing it. And that is pretty much me.
Thank you very much.